Hello, this is High Guitar Guy, and this is Eevees for Dummies, an advanced EV guide for VGC 2020, making it easier for you to make your own spreads. Hopefully you already know what Eevees are. I'm going to talk about it pretty quickly, but this video sort of assumes that you at least know what Eevees are, and if you don't, and you want to leave a comment asking for another video for more in-depth about either what Eevees are, how to get them onto your Pokemon in the best way, please leave a comment down below, leave a like, and let me know, and that could totally happen. So, before I talk about how to make your own spreads, I am going to talk a little bit about what Eevees are. So, this is Pokemon Showdown. Just very quickly, if you look on the far right, these are the stats. So if you have this Gyarados at level 50 with all of this everything, these are the stats you will see. These are the IVs, individual values. So when a Pokemon is caught or hatched, it comes with these. They're a number from 0 to 31. And then over here on the left, which is what these sliders correspond to, are the Eevees. That's going to be the topic of this video. It stands for effort values. So every time you battle a Pokemon and your Pokemon gains experience, or could gain experience, if you're level 100, you'll still gain Eevees without the experience. You get these points. And as you can see from the sliders, at level 50, they lock in at specific values. And that is going to be really important. But you don't necessarily have to memorize it because the damage calculator and Showdown will sort of lock those in for you. As long as you make sure you're at level 50. Eevees do not work the same way at level 50 as they do at level 100. So the way they work at level 50 is the first stat point you get, unless there's some sort of minus nature involved. For plus nature, it works exactly the same. For minus nature, sometimes it's a little bit weird, but most of the time you're not going to be investing in a stat with a minus nature. And I say most of the time because I have a Pokemon I'm currently using that does actually put Eevees into the nature for very specific reasons that I probably won't get into in this video. So, you'll notice the first stat point comes at 4, and then every other stat point you get comes at an additional 8 Eevees. So the first one is 4, and then 8. And you can go all the way up to 252 Eevees in a singular stat, and a total of 508, between any amount of the stats. So you can split those up however you like. One thing to keep in mind as a quick note, the way that it just ends up working is if you invest in an even number of stats, if you try to invest in an even number of stats, you will always end up wasting Eevees. So you'll notice I'm investing in 4 different stats, and I have 4 left over. If I invest in an odd number of stats, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm no longer wasting. Another common thing you'll hear is people talk about 252 spreads. This is what that means. It means you have 252 in one stat, 252 in another stat, and 4, most of the time, if people remember, in a third stat. But this is never going to be optimal. There is no such thing as optimal, but even if there were, 252 would never be it. So, let's get into how to make something more interesting then, like that Gyarados spread that was initially showing up at the beginning there. So the steps that I like to take are, first, I pick a speed stat. It does not necessarily mean that I'm going max speed, sometimes it does. However, you want to pick a speed stat that does something for that mon to allow it to function correctly. Whether it's outspeeding something specific, whether it's underspeeding something specific, which can also be really important, especially if you're running Trick Room. For example, a min-speed Torkoal is going to be 1 speed point slower than Hatterene. So if you're, or it may be the other way around, but either way, if both of those aren't min-speed, you can end up going in the wrong order, and that can really mess up your game. Or if you're not max speed and something else is creeping you, you can end up with some really big problems, like a Modest Charizard doesn't outspeed Jolly Excadrill. So you may end up in those positions where you want to outspeed something, but instead, it gets to hit you first. So that speed stat is the most important stat, which is why it's going to be first. The second thing I like to do is run offensive and defensive damage calcs. This is really important to make sure that you're getting the most bang for your buck. So 252 will get you by in a lot of cases, but by running those damage calcs, you can figure out places where you can potentially cut a few points in one place or another and really allow your mon to function even better. A lot of times if you just use 252, you may find that your Pokemon either isn't doing enough damage or isn't bulking out a hit you would really want it to bulk out. Which brings to the last step of optimize. I had an example today where I was battling and I was supposed to lift something, and it turned out that I did not. And so I went into the damage calcs and I went back and I was able to figure out what happened and optimize it, and now the next time I'm in that scenario, I'll be in a better position because I'll have optimized my EV spread to account for a scenario I may not have accounted for before. And you can do this beforehand, but sometimes you may find that that step just takes playing some battles and really learning about maybe something you wanted to outspeed you didn't before, or like any number of things. And again, there's no such thing as optimal. It does not exist. Pretty much every single time you're going to run into one sort of scenario or another where it comes down to preference. You're going to have to make a decision of, do I make this roll 30% to be able to live a hit maybe a little bit more of the time, or do I sacrifice a little bit of that damage, lower that roll a little bit so that I can bulk out a hit a little bit better? It's really something that just has to be decided on when you're making those spreads. And just a few more things to keep in mind as I go through it. I probably won't get to all of these during this video, but they are things to keep in mind when you're doing your own builds. Life Orb takes 10% of your max base HP. So in terms of Dynamax, Life Orb takes that 10% as if you weren't Dynamaxed. So for Dynamax HP, it would be 5%. And Pokemon always rounds down. That is super important. Life Orb is rounded down. Sandstorm, Leftovers, Burn, whatever percentage it is always rounded down. And that's also important for Citrus Berries and those Confusion Berries, such as Ogwaff Berry, Figgy Berry. Those activate 50% for your Citrus Berry or 25% for your Confusion Berry, unless you have Gluttony. That activates at 50% or 25% rounded down. So, but Citrus and Confusion Berries, those actually are activated on Dynamax HP. So if you Dynamax, your Citrus Berry will still activate at 50%, Confusion Berry will still be 25%, even if you Dynamax. However, that rounded down can be super important if you're using like a Belly Drum Snorlax, for example, and you just go 252 HP. It turns out Snorlax will have an odd HP stat, which means after your Belly Drum, you will still have an odd HP stat that is 1 HP point above 50%, and if you have that Gluttony ability, you still will not get your berry. So understanding EVs and making sure that you check everything out correctly before you try and play the game is super duper important. So, with that out of the way, let's get into some examples. The first Pokemon I want to show off is going to be a Gyarados. So I had the Gyarados there. It's going to be a Lumberry Gyarados. So let's put those moves in. Again, you'll notice that when I do all these Pokemon spreads, I'm going to be doing this Gyarados, Incineroar, and Togekiss as examples for today. And you'll notice they all have moves and abilities and items. These are things you want to pick first. Again, EVs come after all of these things. Sometimes you may find during damage calcs that, oh, maybe I should have a different item so that I get maybe the right damage that I want or the right bulk that I want. But 99% of the time, you really want to know what that Pokemon is doing on your team before you try and pick an EV spread, because otherwise you're just sort of guessing. You really want to know what role that Pokemon is doing before you really pick. For Gyarados, it may not necessarily be clear from this like moveset and item what speed set I want. So one thing you can do, go into Showdown, click on this speed, and then so it organizes by stat. You can do this for any of them, but since we're doing EVs and the most important stat, as I said, is speed, I'm going to look at that. So I'm going to scroll down to Gyarados, it's base 81 speed, and I'm going to see just what's around it. Maybe there's something I want to outspeed that's close to it. And for Gyarados, for this specific set, since I'm running a Lumberry Aggressive Moxie set, again, the ability and everything is super important. I'm gonna see around there. Huh, my loading space 81, but they sometimes run max speed, but not usually. Chandelure, those tend to run max speed. Unless they're Trick Room, in which case they might not, but an offensive one would. Togekiss, those sometimes run max speed if they're very offensive. However, Venusaur does run max speed. Braviary, another common Pokemon that may run max speed. Goodra's base 80, but they don't really run max speed. Passimian might run max speed. So there are actually quite a few Pokemon, like specifically Togekiss and Venusaur, that if I want to be aggressive and hit them first, Gyarados is going to need to be max speed. So already, I've already picked a nature, and I already know I need to be 252 speed. Again, I could just go 252 attack, call it a day for 4 speed, or 4 HP. However, we're going to do a lot better for this. So I'm not Intimidate on this set. Picking the nature may come right away in the case of this Gyarados. It may come later when you're running calcs and you say, hey, maybe I actually need this nature for this. If I didn't need this much speed, I could probably get away with going Adamant. But because this Gyarados needs to hit that max speed to get off that damage, you already know the nature and we're going to be locked in there. The next thing I'm going to check is actually Rhyperior off of a max Rock Slide. If I'm Dynamaxed, can I live this? And again, because I'm, like, there's the option to run the, like, offensive calc first. Plug in 252 attack. If I just go there, this is an option, right? But we are going to do better, but it's not bad to have a starting point. Waterfall's a pretty good chance to KO in the rain. But I don't live this. Let's see. I'm actually going to take a look and see if it's maybe possible to live this hit from Rhyperior. Because if I can get up the rain with a good amount of attack, I can KO. So let's take a look. Max Rockfall off a Rock Slide. I can start increasing the HP until I live. And that's the amount of HP I need to see what sort of attack I have left. And it's 50% to KO. Another way I can look at this is maybe I've already gotten to KO, so I have a Moxie boost. Because this Gyarados, again, is running Moxie. Say, alright, I kind of would like to have a better chance aside from 50% to, like, aside that's over 50% to KO. So I'm going to take a look at this. It's a guaranteed 2-hit KO. But so again, here's that optimization. I can sacrifice an HP to then find a balance where I can maybe live most of the time and also KO the Rhyperior most of the time. I'm going to check my Dynamax, or my base HP here. 185. I'm going to just go down. I'm going to go down until I'm comfortable with the percentage to KO. I'm going to look, let's check this. So this is 31.3% to KO. I can throw the rest of this into attack for now. Now if I put back on that +1, I'm 68.8% to KO, 31.3% to get KO'd. Here, let's look at the sand damage. So again, this is in-depth stuff, so I'm really going to be going into big detail on this. My HP is 177. I have this nice little calculator here. If I have 177 HP, I divide by 16, I take 11 points of sand. So let's go back over here. 354 minus 11 is 343. So I actually have about a 43.8% to live after the sand tick, because max rockfall again sets the sand. Let's see what happens if I lowered my HP just a tiny bit, put that in defense, but if I go down to 175 now, I only take 10 points of sand damage, because again, it rounds down. 176 is exactly 11, so we would need to go down to 175. Base HP, again, because sand ticks are base HP. I'm going to put and now I can put points into defense. Now I only take 10 points of sand, so I can go down to 240. And take a look at how much defense I need to bring it back down to that. Huh, I only need 4. So I went down, I believe, 16 points in HP, and I only needed 4 points in defense to come back up for that. Waterfall at +1 is a 68.8% chance to KO, which is far bigger than the 43.8% chance to get KO'd by that Rockfall. Now here I can decide, what if I go up to 12 in defense? Now it's 37.5% to OHKO. And I'm just going to drop the last 4 into special defense, and that is the Gyarados. I believe that's... I just went over to 4 here. So again, that's back to that preference. I can decide, maybe I'm okay having that 4, and I want that extra point in attack for the 75% chance to OHKO. It's all about how you want to take those spreads and really make them your own. Both of those are just fine, and both of those are really going to put in the work. Next, I think I'm going to do this Incineroar. So, a nice, quick, easy thing you can do is just go export. My custom set, you can name it whatever you want. Go down to the Incineroar. So now I have all of the moves. I have the item, ability. I haven't picked a nature yet, but that's fine. And now I can start to run all of my damage calcs. So for Incineroar, because I want this to be bulky, again I'm running that big berry with just standard attacking moves. Throat Chop is also an option here if you really want. But in this case it's going to be Darkest Lariat. I'm going to just go throw in max HP. Again, it's another 252, but it's not going to be 252, 252. We have that 252. It can always change. Some people like to even run 200 as that HP stat because this is perfectly divisible by 4, which allows you to get your berry up if you're hit something by 2 Super Fangs, for example. Super Fang isn't that common in this format, and I'm not particularly worried about it. But sometimes being able to activate your berry at those even numbers is nice. If you're potentially taking a sand tick, it might take you in exactly. You don't want to be left 1 HP off. But for this, I think it's going to be just fine. I know I said I would pick my speed stat first every single time, but I'm not going to be going max speed, so I'm not too worried about putting this HP in there first. For Incineroar, most people like to make sure they can outspeed a Charizard in Tailwind. I think that's a really common speed stat. So I'm going to put in Charizard. It hits 167, which is an odd number. So I'm going to go up by 1 point. Divide that by 2 for the Tailwind. And I would need to hit 84 speed. And there we go. This speed stat means I don't need a plus speed nature to outspeed a Charizard in Tailwind. I'm a little bit crazy. I like to run more. However, it's good to know that I don't actually need very much speed if that's the number I want to hit. The speed set I actually like to hit is for 4 speed Hitmontop, because I like to fake out first all the time. And another thing just to check is this is also faster. So if I were worried about Charizard, and I were trying to outspeed 4 speed Hitmontop, I would have already checked to know that my speed set also gets me the 4 speed Hitmontop. Nice. So now my Incineroar will outspeed a 4-speed Hitmontop. Most Hitmontop like to be full bulk, so if they're not running any speed investment, Incineroar will get to fake out first. It's also really nice for Incineroar because there are a lot of Pokemon around that base 60 speed. Primarina, Lapras, Tyranitar is base 61 speed. Other Incineroar, if they're not running as much speed, you get to attack first, and if you're not first, you're last. Going first is really nice, especially for a fake out mon, or just being able to get that extra little bit of chip in. A lot of times for U-turn, it's nice to go second as a pivot, but I really like going first. The next thing I'm going to check are the damage calcs. Again, since we're a tank, I'm going to check the defensive calcs first. Just put in a Excadrill, Adamant Choice Band. I'm going to take a look and see how much defense do I want to put in. Again, back to that preference. If I just went, I could go full defense. I could go Impish Nature. I'd be able to live just the full offense, Banded Excadrill, high horsepower, no problem. But I don't really want to do that. I'm perfectly okay if maybe I only live it some of the time. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to start adding defense until I am happy. So this is 62%. Personally, I like around 1 and 3. So I'm going to see. There we go. If I go down, you'll see it went up 37. Let's go up to 92 defense. That gives me a over 66% chance to live the Adamant Banded high horsepower from an Excadrill. Pretty big. The next thing I'm going to look for on the special defensive side is Venusaur. Venusaur is also a very common Pokemon that Incineroar might potentially want to be in against. Venusaur this generation gets Earth Power. Let's look at Life Orb. We live that. What about a Max Quake? I think so for Incineroar, a lot of the times people will just go Careful. I really do think it's the best nature. Again, you can see from the Flare Blitz, I don't really need the nature on the attack stat, so there's no reason to put the nature there. I might as well put it into both. I'm already happy with the defense stat, so I might as well put the nature somewhere where I'll get some value off of it. If I go up to 20, it's 12.5. I could potentially leave it at 12 and get that same damage roll. And then let's see if I go up to 60. Gives me a little bit of rolls. Let's actually call it there. When I like to go up to 20. Again, it's preference. It doesn't change the calcs on this, but it's possible that on some other mons, like maybe I'll check Lapras. See if I can live a max Hydro Pump. It turns out I do for this specific spread. If I go up to 20, it doesn't look like it actually changes anything. 252. It doesn't look like going from 12 to 20 really changing anything. So I might as well do that. And it's 18.8% chance to live, as long as it's not a boosting nature. Max investment, pretty good chance to live. Really awesome spread, call it a day. Third, I'm going to be showing off this amazing Togekiss spread. So we're going to make our way to here, but I'm going to get rid of all the EVs and go through that process again of how did I get there. This Togekiss is specifically made to fight Durant, and usually Togekiss can't really fight Durant because they're weak to Steel, and you're stuck using Heat Wave, or Durant like to have redirection with them, so you can't just go for the Flamethrower, the Fire Blast. And you'll look here, without any investment, we just get absolutely demolished by this. And that's again, even with the Babiri Berry. But because I want this Togekiss to fight Durant, I'm still going to start with the speed. This Togekiss, I'd like it to outspeed Durant at +1. Durant's speed is 177. So I'm going to go back over to the calculator, put in 177, multiplied by 2/3, which is the equivalent of 1 speed drop, and I see I hit 118, which means if my Togekiss has a speed set of 119, multiply that 1.5 for a speed boost, I now outspeed Durant. That is super good. So let's go up, just increase the speed, see how much I need. Getting a lot closer. There we go, 119 speed. Next thing that I'm going to do is I'm probably going to need the max HP on here. But that's not enough. Even max HP is not enough to live the Life Orb Max Steel Spike from a Jolly Durant. I can potentially try putting the rest into defense. and they live most of the time. Let's see if I go with the nature. 6.3. Not bad. Now we're talking. Now we can potentially start living. But now I don't KO with the heat wave, right? So what good is it to live the hit if I can't KO it back? And the reason you want to KO with the heat wave is because if you just go for the max flare and they have any sort of redirection, you don't actually get to hit the Durant. So being able to KO with the heat wave in this scenario is super good because I get around redirection and I don't even need to use my Dynamax, which is super good. So I'm just going to start dropping this until I'm happy. 52, it went up. Again, I like this 1 and 3 a lot, but it comes down to preference. Nothing is optimal. This is my preference. Maybe your preference is something else. Now that I've invested in 3 stats, I'm going to put something into special attack. I'm going to put 4 into special defense. Just as a check, put the rest into special attack. And just see, am I happy with that? 18.8% chance to KO. But wait, the Durant in this calc is holding a Life Orb. What if I account for that? It takes 13 points from Life Orb, again rounding down. So go back up to Dynamax. We go down to 253 HP, 268 minus that 13. And now my Heat Wave is 50% to KO the Durant. So let's just recap on what this spread does. It has I'm only 31.3% to get KO'd by the Life Orb Max Steel Spike. Meanwhile, my Heat Wave after that Life Orb tick is 50% chance to KO. So, and also, if I get up a speed boost first from the partner, like a Max Airstream, if I hit them before they attack, I still have that 18.8% chance to KO. So this spread is very bulky, again, with that nature, and I was able to decide the nature from looking at the damage calcs and deciding what I really wanted to live. I can also maybe look at some other calcs. How much do I take from a Max Rockfall or Max Steel Spike from an Excadrill? I can eat this hit without even worrying about Dynamax. Let's take a look at the Sandtick. Do I live it with the Sandtick? I know that it's 6%, about 6% from the Sandtick. 92, I think I take 11 points from Sand. I could just double check that. 192 divided by 16 is exactly 12 points of Sand damage. So if I go over here, I can just look at the calc and say 178. I will live the Max Rockfall from out of an Excadrill without a boosting item, because again, Choice Band is not active in Dynamax, and the Sandtick without even worrying about Dynamax, because this Togekiss is so ridiculously bulky. And those are my 3 examples. As a last sort of bonus, this team I am working on, you'll notice this Dusclops has IVs in speed. Now, because this is an Imprison set, this Dusclops is trying to stop Trick Room most of the time more than actually set it. It can be useful to have just a few IVs, because it would be a waste to do this with Eevees, because otherwise it would just be 0, right? And then I would be speed tying. So instead of putting Eevees into speed where I could put them into bulk, I can change the IV to make myself 1 point faster than opposing Dusclops. And while this doesn't change anything about the Imprisoned Trick Room, because Trick Room is negative priority, it means that if I'm trying to Shadow Sneak them, if I'm trying to Nightshade them, if I'm trying to do anything before opposing Dusclops, I'm always going to go first outside of Trick Room. And since my goal is to keep them from getting it up, I shouldn't have to worry about that speed tie, and that can put me in a bit of a position. And that's just a little bit of hint of when you might want to use the IV instead of the EV, but that's a very specific scenario, and 99.9% of the time, you're not going to be doing that. So, I hope everyone enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and a comment, let me know if you want to see more, and have a great day.